Hi guys, you are welcome to another video. So today we are going to look at magnitude, the magnitude and unit vector. Magnitude of a vector and unit vector. Magnitude of a vector and a unit vector. So when we talk about magnitude, so when you have a vector, let's call this vector A. So the magnitude is the length of this arrow, while the direction of the arrow indicates the direction. Right. So let's draw a Cartesian plane to illustrate what magnitude of a vector is and also what unit vector mean. So let's say this is our xy Cartesian plane. So, but in the case of vector, we call the y-axis, we call it j. So the x-axis, so let's call it the I direction. Alright. So let's say we have a vector on this Cartesian plane. Let's call it AI plus BJ. So this simply means this vector, let's call it vector x, is given by AI plus BJ. Okay, so when we are asked to find the magnitude of this vector, what we are simply asked to find is the length of this arrow, that is from this point here, from this point to this very point. That is what magnitude means. So in a nutshell, magnitude is simply the length of the arrow that is indicated on the xy plane. So in order to get the length of this arrow, the common sense thing to do is just to draw our right angle triangle so that we can determine the vertical and the horizontal axis. And being that this is a graph, the vertical axis stands for the J, while the x-axis stands for the I. So in order for us to get the length of this arrow, since we are having a right angle triangle here, so that simply means from this length, from this point here to this point, so that is the length of the x-axis represents A, while the length of the y-axis represents B. So in order for us to get the length of this arrow, we simply use Pythagoras theorem. So Pythagoras theorem will give us the length of the arrow. So let's call the length of the arrow in vector is represented by 2 vertical slash x. So this simply means the magnitude of x. Magnitude of x. So the magnitude of this vector x is going to be given by a square. It's going to be x square. Magnitude of x square is equals to a square plus b square. So that at the end of the day, our magnitude, we find the square root of both sides is going to be equal to square root of a square plus square root of b square. So that is simply what the magnitude of a vector is. So if you have to find the magnitude of, let's say we are given our vector A is equal to, let's call it 3i plus 4j. The magnitude will simply be equal to 3 square plus 4 square. That is equal to 25. So the magnitude of A will be equals to 5. So that is what magnitude is simply all about. So that is the length of the vector of the arrow when you indicate it on the xy plane. Alright, so let's look at what unit vector means. Unit vector simply means, just from as the name implies, it is the smallest smallest unit of a vector. So it just simply means when you, for instance, this particular vector A, vector x, if I should break it down, if I divide it, that simply means the smallest amount of it, the smallest unit of it. So that means if I'm to get the unit vector for this particular vector, I will simply, the unit vector is indicated in this format. So when you see a curve, at the top of a letter, it simply represents the unit vector. So to get a unit vector for vector x, I will need to divide the vector itself, that is vector x. This is vector x. So remember, the vector is indicated with an arrowhead. So then I will divide the vector by the magnitude of the vector. This is the formula for unit vector. So simply the vector itself is divided by the magnitude of the vector. So that will give us the unit vector. So let's look at a typical example now for calculating unit vector. So let's look at, we have a vector, let's call it vector AB. Let's say that we have vector AB given as 3i plus 4j. So we are asked to get the unit vector for this, that is, we have to get this. So the first thing is that we have to get the magnitude of AB. The magnitude is going to be equal to 3 square plus 4 square, and that will be equal to, that is square root of 25, so that is equal to 5. So that is the magnitude. Then the next thing for us to do is to divide the magnitude, the vector, by the magnitude. That is, the unit vector is equal to vector AB divided by the magnitude of AB, and that will be equal to 3i plus 4j divided by 5, and that will give us 3 over 5i plus 4 over 5j. That is the unit vector of the vector. So there is something very interesting that I need to talk about as far as unit vector is concerned. Looking at this example or any other example that you come across, the magnitude of a unit vector is always equal to 1. That is, if you find the magnitude of a unit vector, this vector A, you find the magnitude of it, you always get 1. And that is why it is called a unit vector, because it is the smallest unit. When you divide the vector, when you divide both the I direction and the j direction into their simplest form, this simply means the smallest unit in the I direction is 3 over 5. The smallest unit in the j direction is 4 over 5. So the magnitude of a unit vector is equal to 1. Let's consider this example we just did now. Let's look for the same question that we just found the unit vector as equal to 3 over 5i plus 4 over 5j. So let's find the magnitude of this unit vector. So the magnitude will be equal to the magnitude of this unit vector. So that magnitude of A, the unit vector of AB, will be equal to, so we find the square root of 3 over 5 square plus 4 over 5 square. So that is the magnitude of the unit vector here. So, and that will give us, so this is 9 over 25 plus 16 over 25, and that will be equal to, so that is 9 plus 9, that is 25 over 25, which is equal to square root of 1, which is equal to 1. So the magnitude of any unit vector will always give you 1. So these are basically the things you should know when we talk about unit vector. Then lastly, there is also what we call collinear vector, or yes, collinear or parallel vectors. Collinear or parallel vectors. So when you say two vectors are collinear or parallel, it simply means, for instance, we have this vector let's call it A, and we have vector B. So these two vectors, when they are parallel, simply means they are going in the same direction. That means you can add A plus B. So that if you add them together, this is going to be A plus B. So the addition of A plus B. So that simply means our vector A stops here. So let's call this from this point to this very point is A, while from this point to this point is B. So what this simply means is that these two vectors, they are having the same gradient. So that simply means that we can find the magnitude of this vector. So that is, two parallel vectors have the same unit vector. So when you find the unit vector of this A plus B, you are going to get the same thing with the unit vector of B and the unit vector of A. So the unit vector of A plus B will be the same unit vector of A and the same unit vector of B. So whenever we see a vector, whenever we see two vectors indicated on the same line, let's say from this A, B, C, what this simply means is that the unit vector of the unit vector of AB will be equal to the unit vector of BC, and will also be equal to the unit vector of AC. They all have the same unit vector, being that they are all on the same plane, the same line, sorry. So that is what we call collinear or parallel vector. So thank you very much. So do remember to subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you and God bless.